Good morning. I'm Edward Viljoen and I'm here for the message today. And I feel a little bit self-conscious about the message today because the topic is how do I remember, part of our series on healthy communication, and appropriately, how do I remember, because it's Memorial Day weekend, and that's why I feel self-conscious, because I think I'm going to be talking about something that can be a bit of an elephant in the room, you know. I was just remembering thinking, I worked with the board of directors a long time ago as a consultant. I was working with this team who had a lot of difficulty remembering an event accurately. And so they brought me in, and because I was from the outside, it gave me a perspective that they couldn't see, being on the inside of it. And I could tell very quickly when I started working with this team that something in the room wasn't being talked about. And as a result, nothing could happen. Everything just got stalled. And there was a lie present in the room. And nobody wanted to remember it accurately. And at some point I knew that if things were going to progress, then what was going to have to happen was that lie was going to have to be handled. And so in my innocence and naivete, I just said to the man who was clearly the center of the lie, I just turned to him and asked him innocently, "Did you lie to this team about that event?" And the room went to... It was a very painful moment. But it was also the beginning of tremendous healing. And I knew that that's what was necessary in the moment. I had got the idea from a previous seminar that I had attended as a minister's seminar where something was not being talked about, and it just brought everything to a standstill. And the facilitator had the wisdom to take a big, giant piece of, butcher paper and write the sentence, the question on it, "What is not being said in this room?" And then he just sat down, so we could sit with that. And it was a very powerful moment. I was thinking about this because I was remembering the time when I arrived in this country as an outsider so many years ago. And how I found when I arrived here that, like everywhere else in the world, certain things aren't always as they appear to be. It's the way of humans. For example, Memorial Day, which to an outsider like I was coming in without much help and without much additional information, it was difficult to understand exactly what it was about from what I saw around. I got bits and pieces, but the predominant message I received was that Memorial Day is a weekend that launches summer. Yeah, that's really what I got. A time of picnic and family and wholesomeness and fun. And I look back at it now and I can see how it might look like that to outsiders. And how at the time I felt, on average, I think that maybe the people sometimes don't remember how it started. And other major holidays, I've seen the same thing happen because we don't remember how it started. We don't know what the holiday is about. And then so it's very easy for the holiday themselves to be hijacked and moved in a different direction from what it was ever intended to be. I've seen that. And so as a new visit to this country, I couldn't easily have reported back to you what Memorial Day was, because there was conflicting messages, and so I had to start poking around, and this was before the days of the internet, so I actually had to get books and read and ask people and have conversations with human beings, and over time what I discovered is a holiday, a holy day so large and so complex that I can understand why it would be easy to want to avoid it. Because it's challenging to talk about painful things. And yet, great healing comes, like with that board of directors I worked with, after we do talk about them. And Memorial Day is exactly about that. It's about a time set aside to remember the women and men who have died in any war or any military action. And that's a painful and challenging thing to think about. But when I was clear on that, what Memorial Day was about, it started to become more and more uncomfortable for me to take in around me the growing emphasis on blowout sales. Because the bargains, I realized, were actually more expensive than anybody understands what they cost. It seemed out of step with the spirit of remembering, and so I was confused. But I didn't make too much of it in the beginning because I was an outsider after all, and those folk being memorialized, after all, they weren't my kin, I thought. At least until I encountered this philosophy that introduced me the idea that we are all connected one to the other, and that what happens to one of us is significant to all of us. And so I started to see it differently. And then I realized that even though I wanted to minimize the reality of war by imagining that I am somehow removed from it, that I realized that there is a place inside of me where every war is my war. Every war. And I'm with the words of that song. How many times can a man or a woman turn his or her head and pretend we can't see? How long can that go on? I was remembering our men's retreat, Man's Spirit, and a long time ago I went to one of them, and at that retreat we had the youngest men stand in a circle facing inward towards a fire, and then behind each young man an older man, and behind that older man a yet older man, on and on, to create that image, that powerful image that each one of us is standing on the shoulders of a long line of previous contributing human beings back on into forever. And it's one of those graphic images that a person just doesn't forget. And it's always helped me to really understand our connectedness. And it helped me to grasp this other idea I had read about in our philosophy, that somehow we share a common memory. I could understand that. I understood what it meant to say that everything that has ever happened to anyone is inside of this common memory. Or as our founder Ernest Holmes writes, he says, this mind might be compared to a picture gallery upon whose walls are hung the pictures of all of the people whom the individual has ever known and all the incidents which he has ever experienced. And it occurred to me that whether or not I personally know of someone who died in a military action, the history of that event and the effect of it lives in me. Because I get that not one of us lives in isolation, not one of us is separate from the joys, the challenges, the struggles, the celebrations, the lives of the other one of us. And I